Take a slow breath, dear heart. Not the kind of breath you take to survive another day. The kind you take when something inside you is finally tired of running. Stay a moment more. There is something waiting here for you. And perhaps you already know that. Perhaps that is why your eyes found these words. Perhaps that is why, lately, life has felt strangely alive with small interruptions that refuse to leave you alone. A song arriving at the exact moment you were thinking of someone. A name appearing where it should not. A memory resurfacing after years of silence. A feeling you cannot explain. A pull, a whisper, a knowing. And somewhere deep within yourself, a question has begun to form. Not loudly, not dramatically, only softly. As though the universe itself leaned close to your ear and asked, "What if none of this is random?" I want you to sit with that for a moment. Because I think there have been too many things in your life that looked like accidents, but were never accidents at all. You have lived long enough to know that some moments arrive carrying a weight that logic cannot explain. A glance, a goodbye, a missed opportunity, a door that closed despite your desperate efforts to hold it open. A person who appeared exactly when your heart was preparing to surrender. You know these moments. You have collected them like pressed flowers between the pages of your life. And yet, what amazes me most about you is not what happened. It is how much you carried afterward. The decades of holding yourself together, the years of being the strong one, the endless practice of saying, "I'm fine," when nobody asked the second question. I see the woman who learned how to keep moving while her heart limped behind her. I see the woman who became dependable because life gave her no other choice. I see the woman who kept showing up, even when she was exhausted, even when she was disappointed, even when she secretly wished someone would notice how heavy everything felt. Especially then, you became so skilled at carrying your burdens that people forgot they were burdens. And somewhere along the way, something strange happened. The world began to admire your strength while overlooking your tenderness. People noticed what you could do. Fewer noticed what you needed. And so you adapted. You learned how to become your own shelter, your own comfort, your own rescue. But dear heart, even the strongest shelter longs for a light in the window. Even the strongest woman sometimes wants to hear footsteps approaching that are not her own. Not because she is weak, because she is human. Because souls were never meant to spend their entire lives convincing themselves they need nothing. I think about you sometimes standing in a quiet room after everyone else has gone. The dishes put away, the phone silent, the responsibilities finished for the day, and suddenly there it is. That space, that quiet, that ache. Not always sadness, something deeper. A longing without a name, the kind that arrives when dusk slips through the window blinds and paints long shadows across the floor. The kind that appears beside a cooling cup of tea. The kind that sits beside you in silence and asks questions you spend daylight avoiding. Who sees me now? Who knows this version of me? Who notices the tenderness I still carry? Because despite everything life has asked from you, you never became hard. You could have, many would have, but you did not. That is one of the most beautiful things about your soul. The world bruised you, yet you still believe in goodness. People disappointed you, yet you still hope. Love wounded you, yet some hidden corner of your heart still keeps a candle burning. Perhaps smaller now, perhaps protected behind walls, but still burning, still waiting. And I think the universe notices that. I truly do. Because the universe has a curious way of responding to what remains alive inside us. Not what we say we want, not what we pretend not to need, what remains true. And the truth inside you has never stopped speaking. Even during the years when you told yourself the story was over. Even during the years when you accepted less than your soul deserved. Even during the seasons when loneliness became familiar enough to feel normal, your heart never completely surrendered its belief that something meaningful still existed ahead. That is why certain signs keep finding you, not because the universe is teasing you, because it is reminding you that your story is still moving, reminding you that your life did not reach its deepest meaning in the past, reminding you that destiny does not operate according to human calendars. There are flowers that bloom after decades underground. There are stars whose light travels thousands of years before reaching the eyes meant to witness them. There are souls who meet each other only after becoming who they were always meant to be. Timing, such a mysterious thing. You have spent years wondering whether certain doors closed because you were not enough. But what if they closed because they belonged to a version of yourself you were never meant to remain? What if every ending carried hidden guidance? What if every delay was preparing terrain your eyes could not yet see? Stay a moment more, there is something waiting here for you. I want to tell you something that your heart may already know. The loneliness you have carried does not mean you were forgotten. The waiting does not mean you were abandoned. The silence does not mean nobody is coming. Sometimes life withdraws its noise so you can hear your own soul again. And your soul has been speaking through dreams, through intuition, through the strange feeling that something is shifting beneath the surface. You feel it, don't you? Not every day, not every hour, but enough. Enough to know that something inside you is awakening. A part of yourself that spent years sleeping beneath responsibility, a part of yourself that remembers wonder, a part of yourself that remembers possibility, a part of yourself that is beginning to believe that love was never meant to be something you outgrow. Not romantic fantasy, not illusion. Something deeper. Recognition, safety, presence. The feeling of finally being seen. And perhaps that is why this title found you. Because lately you have been asking, why do I keep thinking about this? Why does this feeling keep returning? Why does this person linger in my thoughts? Why does my intuition refuse to let it go? Perhaps because the universe often speaks through repetition, not urgency, repetition, a gentle knocking, again, and again, and again, until we finally stop long enough to listen. But before you can understand what the universe may be saying about someone else, there is something it wants you to remember about yourself. You are not invisible, not to life, not to destiny, not to the deeper currents moving beneath ordinary days. The years have not diminished your worth. The disappointments have not damaged your capacity to be loved. The heartbreaks have not made you less deserving of tenderness. You are not standing at the end of your story, you are standing inside it. And stories often feel most uncertain just before they reveal their meaning. So if you have been sensing signs, if you have been feeling a pull you cannot explain, if your heart has been whispering questions that refuse to disappear, do not rush to answer them. Simply listen, simply notice. Simply trust that your soul recognizes things long before your mind understands them, because something is unfolding, slowly, quietly, sacredly, and whether that unfolding leads you toward a person, a truth, a healing, or a forgotten part of yourself, it is not arriving to harm you, it is arriving to guide you. You have carried enough fear, enough self-doubt, enough wondering whether you somehow missed your chance. You did not. Life does not work that way. What belongs to your soul has a way of finding its path again and again and again. So stay here with me. Just a little longer. Rest your tired heart. Let the questions remain unanswered for now. Let mystery be gentle. Let hope sit beside you without demanding certainty. The universe is patient, and so is love. I am here. You are not walking alone. Something beautiful is on its way. As you remain here with me, allowing the noise of the world to drift a little farther away, I want to invite you into a place most people spend their lives avoiding. Not because it is dangerous, but because it is honest. It is the place where old memories sit quietly, neither demanding attention nor fully disappearing. They wait in the corners of the heart like familiar furniture in a house you no longer visit, yet somehow still know by touch. And I sense that for you, there are rooms within yourself that have remained unopened for a very long time. You became skilled at moving forward. Life taught you that. There were responsibilities to meet, people to care for, expectations to fulfill. Day after day, year after year, you learned how to keep walking even when something inside you wanted to stop and simply be held. The world often celebrates this kind of strength. It admires the woman who keeps going. It praises her resilience. It points to her endurance as though it is the highest achievement of all. Yet what few people understand is that endurance can sometimes become a lonely place. There comes a moment when the soul grows weary of surviving and begins to long for something softer. I think there were moments in your life when you needed tenderness and received advice instead, moments when you needed understanding and received judgment. Moments when you wanted someone to stay, yet watched them leave. Not always dramatically. Sometimes departures happen quietly. Sometimes the deepest heartbreak is not caused by betrayal, but by absence. A gradual fading, a slow realization that the person you hoped would see you never truly did. You may not speak of these things often. Perhaps you have even convinced yourself that they no longer matter. But the heart remembers what the mind attempts to dismiss. It remembers every time it reached outward and found empty air. It remembers every promise that dissolved, every goodbye that arrived before you were ready. Every version of yourself that loved with sincerity and paid a price for it. Yet, I want you to notice something remarkable. Despite everything you have endured, your heart never completely closed. It may have become cautious. It may have learned to protect itself. It may have hidden certain hopes beneath layers of practicality and wisdom. But it never stopped being capable of love. That is not weakness. That is sacred strength. Stay a moment more. There is something waiting here for you. When I look at the journey of your soul, I do not see a series of mistakes. I see a woman gathering wisdom in ways she never would have chosen. I see someone who kept learning how to carry light even while walking through shadows. The experiences that wounded you were never proof that you were unworthy. They were chapters of understanding. They were invitations to discover truths that could not be learned any other way. Still, there are nights when old feelings return. Perhaps it happens unexpectedly. A familiar song drifts through a room. A scent triggers a memory. A photograph appears while sorting through forgotten things. Suddenly, years collapse into seconds. You find yourself standing inside a feeling you thought had disappeared. The strange thing about healing is that it rarely moves in straight lines. We imagine that growth means leaving the past behind forever. Yet often growth means being able to revisit old pain without becoming trapped inside it. It means looking at former wounds with gentler eyes. It means recognizing that the woman who suffered deserved compassion all along. I wish you could see yourself the way your soul sees you, not through the lens of regret, not through the lens of disappointment, not through the lens of everything that failed to become what you hoped, but through the lens of courage. Because courage is not the absence of heartbreak. Courage is continuing to love life after heartbreak. Courage is continuing to believe in goodness after disappointment. Courage is allowing hope to survive when cynicism would feel safer. And you have done that more times than you realize. There is an image that comes to me when I think of you. I see a quiet hallway late in the evening. The house is still. The day's obligations have finally ended. Footsteps echo softly against tile. No one else hears them. No one else notices the woman moving through that silence, carrying the invisible weight of years. Yet the universe notices every sacrifice, every silent tear, every prayer spoken only within the privacy of your own thoughts. Nothing has been lost, nothing has been unseen. Even the moments you believed nobody witnessed have become part of the wisdom you carry today. Perhaps that is one of the reasons certain feelings have been resurfacing lately. The universe has a way of bringing unfinished emotions back into our awareness, not to punish us, but to free us. What remains unhealed continues calling gently until we are ready to meet it with understanding. Maybe there is still grief asking to be acknowledged. Maybe there is forgiveness waiting to happen. Maybe there is a younger version of yourself who still needs to hear that she did the best she could with what she knew at the time. Imagine offering her that kindness. Imagine releasing the impossible standards you have carried for so long. Imagine no longer measuring your worth by outcomes you could never fully control. How much lighter would your heart feel? You have spent years wondering if you should have been different. More patient, more careful, more guarded, more understanding. Yet the deeper truth is that your soul was never learning how to become less of itself. It was learning how to honor itself. There is a difference. One path asks you to shrink. The other asks you to remember. And remembering is what is happening now. You are remembering that your needs matter. You are remembering that your feelings deserve space. You are remembering that love is not something you must earn through endless sacrifice. You are remembering that being needed is not the same as being cherished. These realizations arrive slowly. They do not announce themselves with thunder. They arrive like dawn entering a room through partially opened blinds. At first, only a little light appears. Then more. Then suddenly everything looks different. This is where your soul stands now, not at an ending, not even at a beginning, but at an awakening. An awakening to truths that have been waiting patiently beneath the surface of your life. And one of those truths is this: what you have been longing for is not weakness. The desire to be seen, understood, valued, and loved is not something to outgrow. It is part of your humanity. It is part of your design. The longing itself is sacred because it points toward connection, and connection has always been one of the soul's deepest purposes. Perhaps this is why the universe keeps placing certain thoughts before you. Perhaps this is why certain feelings refuse to disappear. They are guiding you inward before they guide you forward. They are helping you understand that the love you seek must first include the woman standing before the mirror, the woman who survived everything, the woman who kept going, the woman whose heart is still capable of wonder despite all she has seen. Stay here with that truth. Let it settle gently. You are not too late. You are not forgotten. You are not standing outside the story that was meant for you. The path has always been unfolding, even when you could not see it. And every experience, every heartbreak, every unanswered question has been leading you toward a deeper understanding of who you truly are. I am here. You are not walking alone. Something beautiful is on its way. As we continue walking together through these quiet corridors of the soul, I want to bring you closer to something that has been living beneath the surface of your life for far longer than you realize. It is not your pain. It is not your disappointments. It is not even the memories that have shaped you. It is something more tender than that. It is longing. The longing that has traveled beside you through years of responsibilities, through seasons of change, through victories that felt incomplete and losses that left invisible marks upon your heart. Longing is often misunderstood. People speak of it as though it is a weakness, as though wanting something deeply is evidence of lack. But I see it differently. Longing is one of the soul's most sacred languages. It is the quiet compass that continues pointing toward what matters. It is the part of you that remembers there is more life to be lived, more love to be received, more truth to be discovered. I think there have been moments when you tried to silence that longing. You told yourself to be realistic. You reminded yourself of what had happened before. You learned how to lower expectations in order to protect your heart from further disappointment. Perhaps you even convinced yourself that certain dreams belonged to younger versions of you, that certain desires were no longer practical, that certain hopes were best left untouched. Yet despite your efforts, something inside you continued to whisper, not loudly, not insistently, simply persistently, like a distant bell heard across water, like a light left burning in a faraway window. The whisper remained because it was never created by fantasy. It was created by truth. The soul does not long for what is meaningless. It longs for what carries significance. And I believe that much of what you have been feeling lately has less to do with another person and more to do with an awakening within yourself. Sometimes the universe uses someone as a mirror. Sometimes a thought, a memory, or a connection arrives not merely to draw our attention toward another soul, but to reveal parts of ourselves we have neglected. That is why certain people seem to appear at exactly the right moment. They stir something ancient within us. They awaken forgotten possibilities. They remind us of feelings we believed were lost forever. Their purpose is not always to stay. Their purpose is often to reveal. Stay a moment more. There is something waiting here for you. I want you to think about the woman you were before life taught you caution, before heartbreak taught you restraint, before disappointment convinced you that expecting less would hurt less. There was a version of you who approached life with openness, a version of you who believed in possibility without requiring proof. A version of you who could feel wonder without immediately questioning whether it was safe. She still exists. She has never disappeared. She simply learned how to hide when the world became too heavy. The remarkable thing is that she has been finding her way back to the surface. You may have noticed it in small ways, a sudden emotional response to something beautiful, a desire to reconnect with parts of yourself long neglected, a curiosity about what the future still holds. These moments are not random. They are signals. They are evidence that your spirit is beginning to trust life again. Trust is such a delicate thing. When it is broken, we often imagine we can rebuild it through logic. We analyze, we evaluate, we become careful. Yet true trust is not rebuilt through thought alone. It is rebuilt through experience, through allowing ourselves to remain open despite uncertainty, through choosing courage even when guarantees are unavailable. And perhaps that is the invitation before you now. There is a reason certain feelings continue returning. There is a reason certain thoughts refuse to disappear. It is not because you are meant to obsess over them. It is because they are pointing towards something unfinished within your heart. Not unfinished in a painful sense, unfinished in a sacred sense, like a flower preparing to bloom, like a song waiting for its final notes. For many years, you have carried a particular kind of loneliness. Not the loneliness of being physically alone, but the loneliness of feeling unseen. There is a difference. One can be surrounded by people and still feel profoundly unknown. One can spend decades fulfilling roles, meeting expectations, solving problems, and caring for others while quietly wondering who notices the person behind the responsibilities. I think you know this feeling well. You have become so accustomed to being strong that others rarely ask what your heart needs. You have become so reliable that people often forget you also require comfort. You have become so capable that many assume you no longer need support. Yet, beneath all of that strength lives a woman who still wishes someone would look at her with genuine understanding. Someone who would notice the tenderness she protects. Someone who would recognize the beauty that exists beyond what she does for others. This desire is not selfish, it is deeply human. I want to tell you something that your heart may resist at first. The longing you carry is not that something is missing from you. It is evidence that something beautiful still lives within you. People who have completely surrendered to bitterness no longer long for connection. They no longer hope. They no longer wonder. The fact that your heart continues reaching toward meaning reveals that it remains alive. It remains open. It remains willing to participate in the mystery of life. And life is a mystery, dear heart. Far more mysterious than most people allow themselves to believe. There are meetings arranged by timing beyond our understanding. There are lessons unfolding beneath apparent coincidences. There are moments when destiny moves so quietly that we only recognize its presence after looking back years later. What seems insignificant today may eventually reveal itself as a turning point. What feels confusing now may later appear perfectly placed. This is why I encourage you not to rush toward conclusions. Let the feelings be present without demanding immediate answers. Let curiosity replace fear. Let wonder replace control. The soul rarely reveals its deepest truths all at once. It unfolds gradually, inviting us to trust the process rather than force the outcome. Imagine standing near a window at dusk. The room is quiet, the day is ending, light filters softly through the blinds, casting delicate patterns across the floor. On a nearby table sits a teacup, still warm from a drink slowly enjoyed. In that moment of stillness, there is nothing to solve, nothing to prove, nothing to chase. There is only presence, only awareness, only the recognition that life continues moving even when we stop pushing. I believe your soul is asking for more of these moments. Not because you are meant to withdraw from life, but because you are meant to reconnect with yourself. The answers you seek are not hidden in distant places. They are emerging from within. Every sign, every intuition, every recurring feeling is gently guiding you back toward your own truth. And what is that truth? It is that you are worthy of being seen, worthy of being cherished, worthy of receiving the same tenderness you have so freely given, worthy of believing that your story still contains beautiful pages waiting to be written. The years behind you have brought wisdom. The years ahead still carry possibility. So stay here a little longer. Let your heart soften where it has become guarded. Let your spirit breathe where it has become burdened. Let yourself consider the possibility that what the universe is trying to tell you has less to do with fear and more to do with hope, less to do with loss and more to do with becoming, less to do with another person and more to do with the extraordinary woman you are remembering how to be. I am here. You are not walking alone. Something beautiful is on its way. As you continue this journey with me, something subtle begins to change within the landscape of your heart. The longing we have spoken about is no longer standing at a distance. It is no longer something you are merely observing. It is becoming a doorway, and every meaningful transformation begins this way. Not with certainty, not with answers, but with a willingness to stand before a door that has remained closed for years and consider, perhaps for the first time, that it is safe to open it. For much of your life, you have carried truths that were too heavy to fully acknowledge. Some were born from heartbreak. Others emerged from disappointment. Some arrived through experiences that taught you painful lessons about trust, vulnerability, and hope. Over time, you became skilled at carrying these truths without looking directly at them. You adapted, you survived, you learned how to continue moving forward while certain parts of yourself remained quietly untouched. Yet the soul has a remarkable way of guiding us back to what still requires our attention. Not because it wants us to suffer again, but because it wants us to become whole. Wholeness is not created by avoiding old wounds. It is created by meeting them with compassion. It is created by allowing light into places that have remained hidden for too long. I sense that there is a part of you that has spent years negotiating with disappointment, a part that learned how to expect less in order to hurt less. Perhaps you stopped asking for certain things because asking felt dangerous. Perhaps you convinced yourself that wanting more would only lead to further loss. So you became practical. You became wise. You became careful with your heart, and yet, dear heart, there is a difference between wisdom and surrendering your deepest truth. Many people mistake self-protection for peace. They tell themselves they have moved on when in reality, they have simply stopped reaching. They call it acceptance when it is actually resignation. But your soul has never fully accepted a life disconnected from love, meaning, and authentic connection. That is why these feelings continue to rise. That is why certain questions continue returning. Something within you knows there is more. Stay a moment more. There is something waiting here for you. The more deeply we listen, the more we begin to understand that life is not asking you to become someone else. It is asking you to stop abandoning yourself. For years, perhaps without realizing it, you have been offering understanding to everyone except the woman who needed it most. You forgave others for their limitations while judging yourself for your humanity. You extended compassion outward while withholding it inward. You carried impossible expectations and called them responsibility. You carried old guilt and called it accountability. You carried loneliness and called it strength. But what if strength was never meant to look like constant endurance? What if true strength is allowing yourself to be honest? Honest about what hurt. Honest about what mattered. Honest about what you still desire. Honest about the tenderness that remains alive beneath every layer of protection. There comes a point in every soul's journey when pretending becomes more exhausting than truth. And I believe you are approaching that point now. Not because life is demanding perfection from you, but because it is inviting authenticity. The universe does not require you to be fearless. It asks only that you stop hiding from your own heart. You have spent years carrying memories that still possess emotional weight, not because you are trapped in the past, but Because some experiences leave fingerprints on the soul, there are moments you can still feel if you close your eyes. Moments when you hoped someone would stay. Moments when you wished to hear words that never came. Moments when a part of you waited longer than it should have because hope refused to disappear. Those moments deserve acknowledgement, not judgment, not shame, acknowledgement. Because every version of you was simply trying to find love, safety, understanding, and connection. Every version of you was doing the best she could with the awareness she had at the time. The woman you were deserves your compassion, not your criticism. Imagine how much energy you have spent carrying old self-blame. Imagine how much space it has occupied within your heart. Now imagine releasing even a portion of it. Imagine recognizing that not every ending was your fault. Not every loss was your failure. Not every closed door was evidence of your inadequacy. Sometimes people leave because they are unable to meet us where we stand. Sometimes opportunities disappear because they belong to a different path. Sometimes silence arrives because life is preparing us to hear something deeper. This understanding is not always easy, but it is liberating. Because once you stop making yourself responsible for everything that happened, you create room for something new to enter. And that something new begins with surrender, not surrender as defeat. Surrender as trust. Trust that your story is larger than your fears. Trust that your worth exists independent of anyone else's ability to recognize it. Trust that life has not forgotten you. Trust that what is meant for your soul does not require you to betray yourself in order to receive it. There is profound freedom in this kind of surrender. It allows you to stop chasing validation. It allows you to stop measuring your value according to external responses. It allows you to stop carrying burdens that were never yours to hold. The woman emerging from this understanding is different from the woman who began this journey. Not because she has all the answers, but because she is beginning to trust herself. She is beginning to recognize her own wisdom. She's beginning to understand that intuition is not weakness, sensitivity is not weakness, hope is not weakness. These qualities are gifts. They always have been. The world may have taught you otherwise. It may have rewarded hardness and praised emotional distance. It may have suggested that caring deeply creates vulnerability. But your soul knows better. Your soul understands that the greatest beauty in life emerges through connection, compassion, and openness. And perhaps that is what the universe has been trying to remind you all along. Perhaps every recurring thought, every meaningful coincidence, every intuitive feeling has been gently guiding you toward this realization. You do not need to become harder. You do not need to love less. You do not need to protect yourself by shrinking your heart. You simply need to remember who you are. A woman whose capacity for love survived disappointment. A woman whose hope survived uncertainty. A woman whose spirit continued searching for meaning even when life felt confusing. That is extraordinary, and it matters. As this understanding settles within you, something begins to soften. Not because the past disappears, but because it no longer defines you. The wounds become wisdom, the losses become lessons. The questions become pathways leading toward deeper truth. You are not standing in the ruins of your life. You are standing in the middle of your becoming. And becoming requires trust. It requires patience. It requires the courage to release old stories that no longer belong to you. So allow yourself to exhale. Allow yourself to stop carrying what was never yours. Allow yourself to believe that the future does not have to resemble the past. Because the woman emerging now is no longer seeking permission to exist fully. She is remembering that she was always worthy. She is remembering that her heart was never the problem. She is remembering that love begins with truth, and truth begins here, with this moment, with this surrender, with this quiet decision to trust life again. I am here. You are not walking alone. Something beautiful is on its way. As we move deeper into this unfolding, I can feel something changing within you. It is not loud enough for the world to notice. It is not the kind of transformation that announces itself through dramatic decisions or sudden revelations. It is quieter than that. It is the sound of a soul remembering its own value. It is the gentle return of a woman to herself after years of searching for confirmation in places that could never fully provide it. And if you listen carefully, beneath every question you have carried about love, timing, and destiny, there is another question that has been waiting much longer to be answered. The question is not whether someone else will choose you. The question is whether you are finally ready to choose yourself. This may seem simple at first, but for someone like you, it is one of the most profound shifts imaginable. You have spent so much of your life giving your time, giving your energy, giving your understanding, giving your patience, giving your strength. There were seasons when you became so focused on supporting others that you barely noticed how depleted you had become. You continued showing up because that is who you are. You continued carrying responsibilities because others depended on you. You continued extending kindness because your heart would not allow you to do otherwise. Yet somewhere along the way, a quiet imbalance emerged. You became a source of comfort for many people while forgetting that you too deserved comfort. You became skilled at recognizing the needs of others while overlooking your own. You learned how to pour from your cup long after it had become nearly empty. And because you carried yourself with grace, many never realized how much effort it required. I want you to understand something important. The exhaustion you have sometimes felt was not merely physical, it was spiritual. It came from years of placing your worth in service while forgetting that your existence itself carries value. You do not become worthy because of what you do. You do not become lovable because of what you provide. You do not become deserving because of how much you sacrifice. Your worth existed before any role you fulfilled. It existed before anyone recognized it. It existed before you accomplished anything at all. Stay a moment more, there is something waiting here for you. One of the greatest illusions many women carry is the belief that love must be earned, not consciously perhaps, but subtly. Deep within the heart lives the idea that if they are patient enough, understanding enough, forgiving enough, supportive enough, then they will finally receive the love they desire. Yet true love does not arrive as payment for sacrifice. It arrives as recognition. It arrives when two souls meet each other without requiring either one to diminish themselves. There were times when you accepted less than your heart deserved because you believed understanding someone else's limitations was more important than honoring your own needs. There were moments when you remained in emotional spaces that asked you to wait endlessly, hope endlessly, or settle endlessly. Not because you lacked wisdom, but because your capacity for compassion was so vast that you often extended it beyond healthy boundaries. Compassion is beautiful. Self-abandonment is not. And I believe you are finally beginning to understand the difference. The woman emerging now no longer believes that suffering is proof of devotion. She no longer confuses emotional scarcity with depth. She no longer interprets inconsistency as mystery. She is learning that genuine connection feels different. It feels safe. It feels reciprocal. It feels nourishing rather than draining. It allows her to exhale rather than constantly wonder where she stands. This realization changes everything. Because once you recognize your worth, you stop chasing situations that require you to prove it. Once you recognize your value, you stop negotiating against yourself. Once you recognize your beauty, you stop asking people who cannot see it to validate its existence. And what is remarkable is that this understanding has very little to do with arrogance. In fact, it creates greater humility. Why? Because you no longer need to fight for your place in the world. You no longer need constant reassurance. You begin standing within your own truth. I think there is a part of you that has always known this, a part that quietly understood you were meant for more than survival, a part that sensed your life carried deeper meaning. Yet that knowing was often overshadowed by obligations, heartbreaks, and the practical realities of daily existence. Now, however, the knowing is becoming stronger. You are beginning to see yourself differently, not as a collection of past disappointments, not as someone who missed her chance, not as someone whose most meaningful experiences already happened. You are beginning to see yourself as a living story still unfolding. This matters because the future responds differently when we stop approaching it from a place of scarcity. For years, perhaps without realizing it, part of your heart may have operated from the belief that opportunities were running out, that meaningful love belonged to another season, that certain dreams had expiration dates attached to them. Yet the soul does not measure life the way fear does. The soul understands timing differently. It understands that some flowers bloom later than others. It understands that wisdom often arrives before fulfillment. It understands that certain gifts can only be received by the version of you who exists now, not the version who existed years ago. Think about how much you have learned. Think about how deeply you can see beneath appearances. Think about how your understanding of love has matured. You are not less because of the years you have lived. You are more aware, more compassionate, more discerning, more capable of recognizing what is real. And perhaps this is why the universe has been drawing your attention inward before guiding you outward. Because the relationship destiny most wanted to heal was never merely the relationship between you and another person. It was the relationship between you and yourself. For too long, you viewed yourself through the eyes of past experiences. Now you are learning to view yourself through the eyes of truth. Truth says that your tenderness is a strength. Truth says that your sensitivity is wisdom. Truth says that your heart survived things that might have hardened someone else, yet it continued choosing love. Truth says that your story is far from over. There is something profoundly beautiful about a woman who has walked through disappointment and still remains open to possibility, not naive, not unaware, open. Such openness is not the result of innocence. It is the result of courage. It is earned through every moment she chooses hope, despite having reasons to withdraw from it. You have earned that courage. You have earned this wisdom. And now you are being invited into something new, a deeper relationship with your own worth, a deeper trust in your own intuition, a deeper belief that what is meant for you will not require you to become less of yourself. This is not the end of longing. It is the transformation of longing. What once felt like emptiness begins becoming anticipation. What once felt like waiting begins becoming preparation. What once felt like uncertainty begins becoming faith. The woman standing here now is no longer searching for evidence that she matters. She knows she does. She is no longer asking life for permission to take up space. She knows she belongs. She is no longer measuring herself against what she lost. She is beginning to measure herself by what remains. And what remains is extraordinary. A heart still capable of wonder, a spirit still capable of trust, a soul still capable of recognizing love when it arrives. Hold that truth close. Let it settle into every corner of your being, because something important is approaching, not through force, not through struggle, but through alignment, through worthiness remembered, through truth embraced, through a destiny that has been moving towards you as faithfully as you have been moving toward it. I am here. You are not walking alone. Something beautiful is on its way. As we arrive at this final stretch of our journey together, I want you to notice how different the landscape feels from where we began. The questions that once felt heavy no longer carry the same weight. The uncertainties that once seemed overwhelming have softened around the edges. Nothing outside of you may have dramatically changed, and yet something within you has. That is the nature of true transformation. It rarely begins in the visible world. It begins quietly within the soul. It begins when a woman who has spent years searching for answers finally realizes that many of the answers were growing inside her all along. When we first sat together in this sacred space, there was a feeling of searching, a feeling that perhaps the universe was trying to tell you something about someone, about love, about timing, about destiny, and perhaps it was. But now you can see that the message was never only about another person. The message was always larger. The message was about you, about your worth, about your healing, about your readiness to receive a life that reflects the depth of your spirit rather than the wounds of your past. There is something extraordinary that happens when a woman stops defining herself through what she has lost. She begins to see what remains. She begins to notice the strength that survived every disappointment. She begins to recognize the wisdom that emerged from every hardship. She begins to understand that the story was never about what was taken from her. The story was about what could never be taken. And what could never be taken from you is the beauty of your soul. Life tested it, heartbreak challenged it, time refined it, yet it remains, the tenderness remains, the compassion remains, the capacity for love remains, the ability to hope remains. Even now, after everything you have experienced, there is still a part of you that believes in meaningful connection. There is still a part of you that looks at the world and senses that something beautiful exists beyond what can be immediately seen. There is still a part of you that knows your life carries purpose. That knowing is not accidental. It is the voice of your soul. Stay a moment more. There is something waiting here for you. I want you to imagine all the versions of yourself that have walked beside you throughout your life. The younger woman who believed love could conquer anything. The woman who endured disappointment and learned difficult lessons. The woman who carried responsibilities while hiding her exhaustion. The woman who sat alone in quiet rooms wondering if anyone truly understood her. The woman who kept moving forward even when her heart felt weary. They are all here. None of them were mistakes. None of them failed. Each one contributed something necessary to the person you have become. Too often, people look back at earlier versions of themselves with judgment. They criticize their choices. They regret their trust. They wish they had known more. Yet wisdom only exists because those versions lived. The woman you are today was built by every experience, every risk, every heartbreak, every act of courage. Nothing was wasted. Even the seasons that felt empty carried hidden purpose. Even the delays carried preparation. Even the loneliness carried lessons. The universe has a way of using every chapter of our lives to create depth within us. And depth is something you possess in abundance. You understand things now that could never have been taught through words alone. You understand resilience. You understand compassion. You understand the difference between attention and genuine care. You understand the difference between being wanted and being valued. You understand the sacred importance of authenticity. These understandings are not burdens, they are treasures, and they are preparing you for what comes next. Because I believe something important happens when a woman finally remembers her worth. She stops waiting for life to begin. She stops believing that fulfillment exists somewhere outside herself. She stops approaching the future from a place of fear. Instead, she begins walking forward with quiet confidence, not because she knows exactly what will happen, but because she trusts who she has become. This trust changes everything. It changes the way you see opportunities. It changes the way you experience relationships. It changes the way you interpret uncertainty. Most importantly, it changes the way you love yourself. For so long, you may have believed that self-love was a concept, an idea, a practice. Yet true self-love is recognition. It is seeing yourself clearly and choosing kindness anyway. It is acknowledging your imperfections without allowing them to define you. It is honoring your needs without guilt. It is understanding that your value is inherent rather than earned. You have spent much of your life extending grace to others. Now it is time to extend that same grace to yourself. The beautiful thing is that once this shift occurs, destiny no longer feels like something distant. It begins to feel present. You realize that destiny is not merely an event waiting in the future. It is a relationship with life itself. It is the unfolding of your most authentic self. It is the alignment between who you are and what you allow yourself to receive. And yes, this includes love. Not only romantic love, all forms of love. The love that arrives through meaningful friendships. The love that arrives through purpose. The love that arrives through connection. The love that arrives through finally feeling at home within your own heart. When that inner home is established, something remarkable happens. You stop seeking people to complete you. Instead, you recognize those who complement the wholeness already present within you. You stop asking whether you are enough. Instead, you begin asking whether a connection honors the truth of who you are. This is the energy of emotional union, not dependence, not rescue, union. Two complete souls meeting from a place of authenticity, two hearts recognizing each other without requiring either one to shrink. Two lives intersecting because their journeys have prepared them for that meeting. Perhaps this is what the universe has been trying to tell you all along. Not that you should chase, not that you should fear, not that you should force outcomes, but that you should trust. Trust your intuition. Trust your timing. Trust your worth. Trust that what belongs to your soul recognizes your soul. The signs, the synchronicities, the recurring feelings that brought you here were never meant to create anxiety. They were meant to create awareness. They were gentle reminders that life is still speaking to you, that your story is still unfolding, that the future remains unwritten. There will be moments ahead when old doubts attempt to return, when uncertainty whispers familiar fears, when the mind asks questions the heart cannot immediately answer. In those moments, remember what you have discovered here. Remember that your value is not determined by external circumstances. Remember that your past does not define your future. Remember that love is not something you must earn. Remember that you have survived every season that once seemed impossible. Remember that your soul carries wisdom. Remember that your heart remains beautifully alive. And most of all, remember this: you were never forgotten. Not by life. Not by the universe. Every step has been leading somewhere. Every lesson has been preparing something. Every ending has been creating space for a beginning you could not yet see. So walk forward gently. Walk forward bravely. Walk forward knowing that you no longer need to search for proof that you matter. You matter because you exist. You matter because your heart still chooses love. You matter because your soul carries light. And somewhere beyond this moment, already moving toward you, are experiences, connections, and blessings that will make sense of much that once felt confusing. Until then, trust the unfolding. Trust the timing. Trust yourself. I am here. You are not walking alone. Something beautiful is on its way.